Welcome back again to Spotlight, where we feature the University of Central Arkansas's College of Fine Arts and Communication. I'm Donna Lampkin-Stevens. I'm joined today by my new friend, Dr. Stephen Plate, who is the interim chair of the UCA Department of Music. So welcome to UCA in Conway.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be on the show today.
Well, we do a lot of music on Spotlight, so obviously you're a big story. So Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and how you became a musician.
So at this point in my career, it's a rather long story, but
that's okay.
But in short, I was born and raised in New York City, and I am a product of public school education in New York City. We hear all different kinds of things about that, but my experiences educationally were strong, and I appreciate growing up in the city that never rests and never sleeps, because part of what keeps it awake is music.
Yeah.
And so from Broadway to the New York Philharmonic to the Metropolitan Opera to the Manhattan Symphony to just all the music opportunities, jazz, at Lincoln Center, and it was just a wonderful place to grow up. And I've often credited my public school teachers who, a long time before me, decided that they would donate 3.5 hours every Saturday morning for what they termed borough-wide band, orchestra, and chorus, and something for which you had to audition. And so I was involved probably from, I really don't remember exactly how old, but all through middle school, all the way through high school. And then once a year we would get together, not only for borough performances, but combined, the 5 boroughs of New York City would come together and rent these very large venues, and we would do, Resurrection Symphony of Mahler, or Symphony of 1,000, and wonderful opportunities to play the best of band repertoire. And the thing that stuck out in my mind is these public school teachers donated their time, all those years, all those hours.
Which you didn't realize at the time.
Which I didn't realize the importance at the time, and I also didn't understand the impact it was having on me and my life. My father tells me that at the age of 2, I would crawl up on the piano bench and start picking out melodies. And
so were your parents musical?
No, my mother studied piano. She was from a family of 4, and she was the third of 4, and her older siblings were much more skilled and much more possessive of the family's piano. So my mom would always demonstrate the one piece that she had from memory, the part of one piece that she had from memory. But my mom was a housewife, a homemaker, and my father was a blue-collar factory worker. And the odd thing about this is, traditionally, stereotypically, moms are the nurturers, but it was my father who took a note of a musical talent that seemed to be alive in me. And my father, from as long as I can remember, would say, "Well, you've just got nothing but notes in your head." No, I don't think he necessarily meant that as a compliment.
I can see.
But it was something that my father, for his generation, 6'3", very large factory type worker, to notice the softer side of things, or the touchy-feely side of things, was unusual. So at a very young age, and I'm confused about exactly when that was, but my dad found me a piano teacher as a neighborhood woman. Yes, and she was the stereotypical slap you on the knuckles with a ruler kind of thing. But I remember her very fondly, in that the very first time at the piano, she introduced me to music theory, which in itself, my lessons were $3 an hour. Way back a long time ago, so that was the going rate for a neighborhood lesson. Anyway, she taught me music theory from the very first day, and in her mind, she was teaching me great technique at the piano. And then in the 4th grade in New York City schools, they do a music aptitude test that they imposed on everyone, actually. And so I guess I scored well on that exam. And I went to the band room, which was the auditorium, and they handed me a string bass. It probably doesn't surprise you that I was very tall for my age. And of course, the string bass requires a very large hand, stereotypically a very large hand, with a tall stature. So,
sure.
Although I know very short professional. Oh, I'm so sorry. You should have warned me. And I should have turned this off. Anyway, my older brother played the bass. And I took that home. And my father took a look at that. And what was he thinking? He was thinking about the car and how we're going to transport 2-string basses. He had already gone and bought a station wagon, so my brother's bass would fit in the back. He said, "Take it back. We can't have 2 of those, in the house." So I went back to the band director, and he said, he took a look at me. He said, "Well, look at those lips," and he handed me a tuba. And I guess it's what was left. Quite honestly.
Yeah.
So by default, I ended up being a low brass player. At the same time, I was studying piano. So piano gave me the skills to read music notation, bass clef, treble clef, the whole 7.5 octave scope of the piano. And then brass gave me the entree to orchestral music and band music and theater musical music, and those opportunities opened up. So and then I felt like I had mastered the basics of those instruments pretty quickly. But my piano teacher could only teach me to a certain point. And my father realized it. I think that she realized it. She called my parents and said, I've taught him, and I don't mean this in a proud way. I mean, she said, "I've taught him everything I can teach him." So my father, again, went looking for a teacher of repute, of some standing. And he found a woman by the name of Gloria, who was a Lincoln Center graduate. And so the Juilliard connection and the Manhattan School connection. And I studied with her, I think, starting at the age of 12. And so from 12 till 16 and a half, I studied with Gloria. And for her, she was all about the Manhattan scene, all the New York City scene. And she began immediately to put me on the stage as a recitalist. And her favorite place to go was Steinway Hall. Now, Steinway, of course, is a piano brand, but they had a recital hall in Manhattan, which they still do today. The one that I was in was on 57th Street, kitty corner, across the street at an angle to Carnegie Hall. So from the green room, I could look out at 57th Street, and she kept pointing down the street. Look, there's the canopy for Carnegie Hall. That's where you're headed. That's where you're headed. I could make you great if you would just practice. I could make you great. Well, at the time, I guess I was a pretty strong sight reader. And so I was a typical teenager in growing up in New York City with time on my hands and the challenge to use it beneficially. And I wasn't convinced that music was what I wanted to do. Because
what else were you interested in?
So I loved science. I loved biology. And I remember this fact. I hope I remember it accurately. In New York City, you take the Regents exams in every subject every year, or at the end of every semester, or at the end of every year. And you cannot progress through your studies if you don't at least get a passing grade in those subject areas. So standardized testing in the city was another measure of the quality and the demand that they put. So I know in languages, I remember in sciences, I remember in mathematics, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus. We had these Regents exams that we had to pass. The thing that stands out in my mind was biology. I loved biology, and I excelled at it, I guess because I loved it. And I remember being told at the time, listening with a musical ear and listening with my other ear, that I had scored one of the highest scores in the state on the biology exam. It surprised me to be told that. But I also auditioned for the High School of Performing Arts in the 8th grade and was accepted. And I remember something about that. It was on 47th Street, I think. And from where I lived, from where I was raised, it was a bus, the ferry, a train, and walking several blocks. And they were only accepting 60 new students at that school out of all of New York City.
Wow.
So to be accepted into that program was dynamic and also scary, So I obviously had those things in mind. But then I had rather, I guess, a spiritual experience around the age of 16 and a half. And I say spiritual for a number of different reasons. I don't mean religious, but I guess I settled upon my calling. And through a change of jobs, because I always worked, my dad said, "Well, son, you're 12 years old. You're almost a man. Get a job." So the challenge was to hold down a job, practice, perform, do all of these things, which I did. But then I met a young man who graduated from a school that I was occasioned to understand about, to hear about. Several of the students in my church had decided to go there for various things, and they had a great music department. So I ended up going, actually just north of here in Springfield, Missouri, auditioning for and going to college as a piano major. So
At Drury.
it wasn't Drury, it was actually Evangel University.
Evangel University, okay.
Yeah, it was a small denominational school. I don't remember how large it was, but it was a small school at the time. But the department was already nationally accredited for music, and those 11 full-time faculty members and some 13 or so part-time adjunct faculty members changed my life.
What did you think you wanted to do with a music degree?
So, you know what, I didn't imagine I was going to teach public school. I didn't imagine I was going to be a church musician. I didn't imagine really any of those things. I just knew that in my heart and in my mind I had the makeup of a musician. And another thing that happened that I need to give my dad credit for was, I believe it was Time Life. I might be confused about this, but we had a hi-fi, what we called a hi-fi stereo unit in the house. And my dad, I came home from school one day, and my dad had ordered the world's greatest symphonic music. And I would sit, Donna, for hours in front of that hi-fi, consuming that music. No score, I didn't have to, it was just listening to these great orchestral works. And really unknown to me, I was building this internal, not knowledge even, just maybe an appreciation or a curiosity or a great interest in this symphonic music. So
back up, was your father a lover of this, or did he do that for you?
He did it for me.
Wow.
In fact, I'll tell you this one anecdote and then move forward with my story. But my father, when he wanted to talk about something, we were invited to the master bedroom, and he would invite us to close the door. And my father would be lying on the bed with the family ledger. And so my dad invited me to the bedroom to close the door for a discussion, just the two of us. And he said, "Son, I want to show you something. I want to share something with you." And I remember he opened the ledger and he showed me the family income. He showed me a pay stub from his week's pay. And his take-home pay was $150 for a family of 6.
Wow.
And then he would show me the mortgage, the utility bill, the tax bill, and all these things. And it came down to then Stephen and lessons. And I remember this very distinctly because I see it written on the page and in this discussion. Well, my father wasn't a harsh man, but he was a hard man. Right? And he was raised in the Depression, so a dollar meant great things to him. And he taught me about, so we started the discussion with the magic of compounding daily compounding and what that meant, and the value of a penny. But he told me, he said, "Son, you can see the family income. Your lessons are $25 a week." Now, paying $25 an hour in 1969 was an extraordinary amount of money for music lessons, because it was seen as a luxury and something that was truly a luxury. And Gloria, my teacher, was certainly of that quality and demanded that of me. Anyway, so my father said, "Now, son, you can see that the percentage of our investment with the family resources is extraordinary, and I'm happy to invest in your future at the expense of your siblings. But if you don't practice, I will no longer invest." So, at the time, Gloria was telling me, "I could make you great. I could make you great. You really could be in Carnegie Hall. You really could make a career. I could make you great. But you can't rest on your sight reading skills. You can't rest on your innate talent." Well, it was kind of coming in one ear and it was hitting home, but all choices, you know. So anyway, college. My dad, you know, had interest in Manhattan School, and I had interest in Juilliard. Of course, with a teacher from Juilliard, that was just a natural.
Sure.
You know, she was going to help me. But I needed to get away from home and to go away from home, which is how I ended up in Springfield, Missouri. And I was pretty rough around the edges. And those dear people who were my faculty, they didn't need to motivate me, because the incident that I had at the age of 16 and a half was directional and life-changing for me. But part of that change was getting away from the environment in which I was raised and putting my head on straight and walking in a certain direction. And my very first week at that institution, I decided my life's work. I fell in love with the academy. I fell in love with college. When I walked in the door, Mrs. Baker, my musicology teacher, actually was my advisor. And I walked in and sat in her office. She invited us to pull up our section of the floor, sit down, and she had milk and cookies for us. And I still chuckle about this. I call myself a street urchin, this kid off the streets of New York City, sitting down for milk and cookies in this office. And she went over our schedule with us. I still chuckle at it, but walking back to the residence hall that day, I opened the door and I knew in my heart that this is where I belonged. And I've never wavered from that, really, and have spent my life. This is my 39th year in higher ed. The fall, I guess, will begin my 40th year in higher ed.
So you did your undergrad at Evangel.
And then
straight on into a graduate program?
I did. I can't remember exactly, but I want to say I graduated on May 6th, and on May 9th, I think I was sitting in Cincinnati, Ohio, at Cincinnati Conservatory. And I had auditioned, as many people actually applied at the schools you would imagine. You know, North Texas, Indiana, all these well-known music schools. But Cincinnati was a school that actually immediately called me back and immediately scheduled an audition and actually got me to Cincinnati at their expense, as I remember it. And I auditioned on piano, I auditioned on tuba, because I had continued my studies in all of these areas. But now those Time Life greatest symphonic works, I fell in love with instrumental conducting my freshman year. And I studied privately, applied conducting all the way through undergraduate school. I took every course that they had, and then some, and I had been given opportunity to conduct performances. So I did that, and much to my piano teacher's chagrin, June has passed on now, and she was one of the most influential people in my life, my undergraduate piano teacher. I was accepted in conducting, and I chose to do conducting. So I did both my master's and my doctorate degree at Cincinnati Conservatory, and of course that also was a life-changing experience, and one that I'm grateful, for to this day. But somewhere after my master's degree, which I completed in a year or so, jobs were hard to find, and I remember IBM was hiring music theorists, because I had a cognate in music theory. They were hiring music theorists at $27,000 a year, which in the day was a lot of money, and they were training, and so I was actually filling out an application to go to look at going with IBM, because college jobs were hard to find. And the night I was sitting at the desk writing, I got a phone call from my alma mater. And there had been a change in the leadership, and it happened to be my conducting teacher. Oh. So he called me on the phone. He said, "Stephen, you don't know this, but we're starting an orchestra program, and we have an opening, and we think that you're the person to come there." So I got an opportunity to go and work with my alma mater for 10 years.
At Evangel.
At Evangel. And the neat thing about that was, of course, new jobs are hard, but the faculty trusted me. They knew me. They knew who I was in undergraduate school. I don't think they were quite prepared for who I'd be.
So how many years later was this after your undergrad?
I was 23, so it was soon after.
Wow.
It was.
Okay.
I was hired during the summer of 1980, I think it was. So okay. I was young. Yeah. And but the great thing about it was they gave me opportunity to teach everything. I started the orchestra program. I started a brass choir. I performed in the faculty brass quintet as a tubist. I had 24, as I remember, at piano students my freshman year. I had tuba students. I taught conducting. I taught music history. I got a lot of experience.
Everything you loved.
Everything I loved. And, everybody used to talk about contact hours back then.
Yeah.
I also conducted the musical orchestra. So, I got to work at 7 in the morning, and I was still there at midnight, finishing musical rehearsals. And what a formative place, though. What an opportunity.
I'm sure.
And at the same time, there was a semi-professional orchestra called the Ozark Festival Orchestra out of Monette, Missouri. And I won the music director's position there. So I started to conduct outside the institution, which was life-changing to me because I've always, from that time until this, I've tried to keep my foot in the professional world as well as the academic world. And it's given me a balance. I've also been a church musician for 27 years. So, the practical side of music making, the functional side of music making, the professional side of music making, and then the academic side of music making. And so, this is my 6th institution. So, I finished my doctorate degree at Cincinnati, had gotten a sabbatical, was able to do that. And then when I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, is really when my conducting career, I would say, began to take off, because I was doing a town and gown kind of orchestra thing at the university. But I won the audition in 1990 to be the music director of the Charlotte Repertory Orchestra, which was what it was called at the time. And Charlotte had gone through a transition, and their symphony was a per-service orchestra. And they went, this is a long story short, they became a full-time internationally based multi-million-dollar budget orchestra. So those avocational musicians who were per-service musicians had nowhere to go. So they formed this orchestra to perform. And when I walked in the door, there were 53 musicians on the roster, full instrumentation. There was a budget of $1,100, which was my salary that first year. And we built that from there. I was the music director for 15 years. And I learned how to build boards and deal with contracts and writers and negotiate performing halls. And when people have asked me, did I learn to be an administrator or did I study to be an administrator? I said, no, I became an administrator through my work as a music director of a urban symphony orchestra, So anyway, that was a long time ago at this particular point. And so I have a lifetime of students around the world. I had opportunity, whether I earned them or deserved them or not, I had opportunity to conduct orchestras around the world and to build that reputation and to just have that experience. I'm often reminded when I visit symphonies and there's an attitude in the orchestra, or the master agreement has become their reason for living rather than music, that we get to do this. I've gotten to make music for a living my entire career, and opportunities to travel around the world doing that. And I have not a moment of regret. And I'm thrilled, honored, scared to death, and happy to be right here in Conway at this particular time.
So after Charlotte, and we're going to run out of time, unfortunately, so we'll have you back later on. But after Charlotte, what were your stops before here?
So I was so busy. In fact, I remember calling my dad. I had so many opportunities that I was being crushed under the opportunities that I was accepting. So I remember calling my dad and said, Dad, I need to drop something. What am I going to drop? So he said, well, son, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. He called me a couple of days later. He said, son, you can't drop any of them. This is who you are. This is what this is what you wanted to be. This is who you were made to be. And so be satisfied in doing them. But soon after that, I got an opportunity for a deanship. And I had 3 young children at home and a family, and I was gone 7 days a week all the time. And international travel, as you know, and traveling around the country is hard to do, and have a full-time administrative job and be a teacher. So anyway, in a nutshell,
that was where were you?
That was Lee University. I went to
Lee
in
University.
Cleveland, Tennessee. From there, I went to Houghton College in New York, Great Patch School of Music. From there, I went to no, I skipped something. I was at Gardner-Webb University in Charlotte for 13 years.
Okay.
And then the university, and then Houghton, and then I went to Kennesaw State University in 2015, and I came here in September of 19.
And again, we'll have you back on to talk in more detail about this, but what have you found about the UCA music program here?
So I've said this multiple times and in many different places, that UCA music has great bones. I mean that in every affectionate way that I possibly can. The structure that's in place, the curriculum that's in place, the quality and the breadth and the depth of the faculty that have been collected here. And quite literally, many of them have spent 35 and 40 and 40 plus years right here in this community building this department. And so I think it's poised for greatness. I think it has, when I say great bones, I'm talking about the structure that's there. I'm talking about the quality of the faculty. Because I know that students are important, and I know that the university is important, and I know that brick and mortar is important. But the quality of the faculty is what is the backbone of any great music program. And their wealth of experience that they bring to these students and on a daily basis pour into these students. So it is a very strong and nationally accredited music program, and has been nationally accredited for a long time. So they've been doing many good things for many years. And with the undergraduate programs and the strength of those programs, as well as master's degrees and the strength of those programs, I mean, we have things to improve on, and we're working to improve those every day. And we're right now undergoing a curriculum study. Are we doing the right things? Are we teaching it in the right way? How can we repackage this, and what should we be doing for the 21st century student? These are all questions that we're grappling with, and as we're poised for the future. And of course, we're 20 years into the 21st century. It's time for it's time for us to be doing those things. But I'm not saying they didn't do them before I got here.
It's a different.
It's a continuation.
Yes.
And I bring this perspective of 39 years, and fortunately for me, I've never thought that I had arrived in any way. And so if I need to change, we all need to change.
Absolutely.
And if I realize it in my own thinking and my own teaching, then certainly that's kind of where we are.
Well, Stephen, we'll have you back to talk in more detail about plans for the future. And I think with the Wingate Center, we're poised for great things. So.
Oh yeah, the new building. Oh, and that's another great opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
Wingate Center for Performing Arts. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have you back.
Thank you.
Join us again next time for Spotlight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
What will you find at UCA?
The next generation of artists,
educators,
and communicators.
The College of Fine Arts and Communication offers 42 undergraduate and graduate programs of exceptional quality,
contributing to a deeper appreciation of the human experience.
But we also invest in your experience.
With broadcasts, conferences, exhibits, live performances,
publications, recitals, readings, and screenings.
We even offer a unique artist-in-residence program,
featuring performances and master classes with accomplished visiting artists.
All of that experience pays off.
The school placement rates of our music teacher graduates with K-12 certification is close to 100%. We have many disciplines here, but they all share the same dedication to rigorous practice
and scholarly achievement,
which is why our graduates perform so well.
The College of Fine Arts and Communication at the University of Central Arkansas.
Go here and go anywhere.